What Roman poems inspired Shakespeare? Imagine a world where stories of gods, heroes, and magic are told through poetic tales that have lasted for centuries. That world is ancient Rome, and its poetry has shaped much of what we see in literature today. Shakespeare, the famous playwright, was deeply influenced by these Roman stories, especially those written by Ovid. Ovid's collection called Metamorphoses is a huge book filled with myths about transformations, love, revenge, and gods. It was written in the early 1st century of our era and was very popular during the Renaissance, which is when Shakespeare was alive. Shakespeare read Ovid's Metamorphoses and used many of its stories as the basis for his own plays and poems. For example, the myth of Pyramus and Thisbe, which is about two lovers who cannot be together and end up dying for love, appears in Ovid's work. Shakespeare turned this myth into the story of Romeo and Juliet, a play about two young lovers from feuding families who meet a tragic end. He also used this myth in a funny way in A Midsummer Night's Dream, where a group of amateur actors perform a play about Pyramus and Thisbe. This shows how Shakespeare could take a Roman myth and make it fit different tones and stories. Another story from Ovid's Metamorphoses that inspired Shakespeare is about Venus and Adonis. Shakespeare wrote a long poem called Venus and Adonis, which expands on Ovid's brief story of love and loss. This shows how Roman poetry influenced not only Shakespeare's plays but also his poetry outside the theater. Besides Ovid, Shakespeare was also influenced by other Roman writers. Plautus was a Roman comic playwright whose work about mistaken identities and clever servants helped shape Shakespeare's comedy. Seneca, a Roman tragedian, influenced Shakespeare's darker plays like Hamlet and Macbeth with his themes of revenge and revenge tragedies. Plutarch, a Roman historian and biographer, provided stories about real people that Shakespeare used for plays like Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra. Roman poetry and stories kept inspiring writers long after Rome fell. They weren't just stories about gods or history. They touched on universal human feelings like love, jealousy, and revenge. Shakespeare's use of Roman myths shows how these ancient stories remained powerful and relevant. They could be adapted into new stories and genres, making them a lasting part of European culture. In simple terms, Ovid's Metamorphoses was the most important Roman poem for Shakespeare. It gave him many stories and themes to work with. Other Roman writers like Plautus, Seneca, and Plutarch also helped shape his work, but Ovid's influence was the biggest. The fact that Shakespeare kept using Roman poetry shows how strong and lasting Roman literature has been through the centuries. Their stories continue to inspire writers and artists even today, proving that ancient Rome's creative spirit still lives on.